Okay.
Hey everyone, today we're talking to Bill Banta. He's a coach, long time, very successful coaching career with Bob Proctor. But I'll let him get into the details on, from where he started to how he got into the coaching and what he does now. So, Bill, kind of give your
Sure.
brief intro.
Well, thank you. It's an honor to be with you. It's great. I know we've had this on our calendar for a long time, so it'll be fun to finally get to do it. So I appreciate that, Raju. It's great, and it's interesting when you get asked those questions. Um, my career has been incredible. It's been one that sometimes I want to pinch myself, and sometimes I want to say, man, I didn't take enough advantage of that time. I probably should have not taken so much of it for granted. I had met Bob in my early 20s and maybe 23. We were not doing well at much of anything. I was newly married. My spouse grew up in a home. Her father was a school teacher, but he was also a government worker. Had left school teaching and went into the nuclear industry. And I think to develop himself, he was reading self development books the whole time my wife was growing up. In my home, it was the opposite of that. It was survival and whatever happened, and a few divorces and a few stepdads and a few things like that. So I was somewhat opposite. I think looking back on it, I have a spouse. We've been together 33 years, and she's always been my biggest cheerleader, and she could see potential rather than the downside of who I had become based on my environment and my surroundings. And I mean, I grew up with a great mother and great things. I mean, she did her very best, so I wouldn't want to be negative towards them. But she introduced me to Bob. Now this is pre-internet, so we don't have the internet, and she's at home, and a neighbor could see that the power was off occasionally, and sometimes we were just all kinds of things late on the rent, and this neighbor brought her this book called You Were Born Rich by Bob Proctor,
Hmm.
and so she would lay awake at night and read that book, and it would bother me because I thought, man, what is all this garbage you're listening to or reading? And she'd listen to cassette tapes, and but she saw a vision, and she took some money instead of paying rent that we'd borrowed and to pay rent, and she sent me to a Phoenix, Arizona seminar on the science of getting rich that Bob Proctor was doing. And I, as a young 23-year-old, nearly 24-year-old man, for the first time, I had this concept that maybe I didn't I didn't have to be that. Maybe I could be this. Maybe I could have more, and maybe I could be more. And I had always had this distinct feeling in my soul and in my heart from the age of a little boy, as long as I can remember, looking back, that I wanted to be successful. I saw myself standing in front of people. I saw myself helping people, but I couldn't interpret and connect the dots because I was a laborer. And it was just, that's what my family did. We didn't go to school. We went and had labor. So at this event, at the time I was in the painting industry, and I was painting houses.
Hmm.
And at this event, Bob could see that I wasn't comfortable because I
Hmm.
was surrounded by 35 other really successful people. At least in my eyes, they were super successful. He pulled me out at a break and put his arm around me, and he says, I'm not sure what you're doing in this room, son, but I can see that you're not really paying attention, one, and maybe that you're not feeling super comfortable. But he said, let me help you. He said, tell me a little bit about you. And I told him I was a painter, and I grew up this way, and I was earning 19,000 to 20,000 a year. And he said, well, first of all, he said, you're not a painter, you're a business professional. You provide painting as a service. And so I
Hmm.
want you to think about that. I want you to go back in that room and start acting like a professional. Second of all, I want you to get out your pen and start taking notes because you're not writing nothing down. You're not a good student. And third, he said, you just got to let me believe in you until you believe in you. And I'll never forget that moment where it was like, is this guy full of, you know what? I mean, is he just full of crap? I'm like, what is this guy? But also, I had this moment where I thought, wait a minute, what if he's right? And so, fast forward, we borrowed a little bit of money and went through some coaching, and I started studying, and I was following with my wife, and we started to expand. And that little painting company within 7 years was doing seven figures, and it was doing well. And I was no longer wearing white clothes. I was working on the business, not in the business. And
Hmm.
I was using all of these principles, and we would have Bob Proctor Mondays. I called them Bob Proctor Monday, and we'd bring our staff in, 15, 20, 30 painters sometimes, and we would educate them. about setting goals. And we had a big whiteboard out in our shop, and I would ask them to set their goals for the month. And we figured out a bonus system, and we figured out how to put pictures in these vans that we had so that they could see themselves being successful. And I developed men that were coming out of prison and jail, because that's who you hired in the painting industry. Some of these people in the bottom kind of echelons of society who are struggling, that today, because of that, own that company, have multiplied that business, have successful families, have successful real estate investments, travel the country and maybe even the world, so two of them. And I think that in that pivotal moment, I realized, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be there. I'm supposed to be doing that. I'm supposed to be helping people just like I had saw as a child in my youth. And so I reached out to Bob. The 2008 economy was shaking us pretty hard in the construction industry. It was rattling a lot of our chains. And I had taken some big risks in the franchise industry and the assisted living industry. And they were both failing miserably because of the economic times that we lived in. And I ended up losing a little over $2.5 million cash. That was just pretty much my savings. And I lost it. And then I borrowed another $1 million trying to save it. And so then I found myself completely upside down. And then that turned to another 1.5 million. And I got into this weird tailspin. And I remember thinking, wait a minute, I love helping people. I no longer have the emotional state to serve anybody because I'm in a desperate situation. And I reached out to Bob, and I was able to be on a call with Bob. The gentleman that introduced me to Bob was able to reconnect the dots. And I spent about 30 minutes on the call. And over the next few weeks, Bob would reach out to me. He would call me, and I'd be driving, and I'd be really frustrated. And I just had all these emotional, traumatic things going on in my life, personally, professionally, and financially. And again, I mean, so did a lot of people in the construction industry. So I wasn't unique. It was just that I had a connection to Bob. And one thing that stood out to me as I thought I would share this in my story is that I am driving down the freeway here in Southeast Idaho, and I'll never forget, he calls me. And it just was odd that Bob Proctor's calling this guy from a little tiny town in Southeast Idaho. And I pulled over and I said, "Hey, this is Bill." He says, "It's Bob." I'm like, "Yeah, I know. Where are you?" And I said, I'm pulled over. He says, "Good." He said, "Do you have anything to write with?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "I just had a feeling that you were having a really hard day." And he says, "Until I can help you shift and take you back to where we helped you in the 90s, you're going to stay stuck." And he says, "I want to help you." And so he had me write a gratitude sheet. He said, "I want you to write 2 lists. I want you to write everything in your life that's right. I want you to write at least 10 things that seem to be right in your life." He said, "I know a lot of it doesn't appear to be, but then I want you to write down everything that you expect to happen in the next 4 to 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 10 years. And I want you to write it in the present tense. So what's right in my life today and what's going to be right in 5 to 10 years?" And I struggled. Man, that was a hard thing because everything in my life was upside down. The bank accounts, the real estate investments, everything was just in turmoil. My brother was going through a divorce, which made my sister partner. He'd given her 51% to do government contracting of their company. So now I'm partners with a sister-in-law that doesn't like me, and we don't like each other. All of these things. And I'm sitting there writing all these things. I'm thinking, wow, what do I have to be grateful for? And he coached me through that. And he got me off the ledge, and he got me from what was already decent in my life, my family, my marriage. I had eyes, I could see, I could breathe. I actually had fingernails and toenails. I mean, he took me that far down to help me get out of that. And then I started to write things about, 50, 80,000 a month. And I started to write my dreams again, and it shifted me. And then he said, "Now I want you to do this." He said, "I want you to write down 3 to 5 people that are really frustrating you in your life, people that you have disdain for. And he said, I want you to write a forgiveness letter. And then I want you to send them love." And so we went through that for about 30 minutes. And I was able to let go of family and relationships and financials and a business partner that had embezzled some money. And at that moment, I share that to impress upon anybody out there. We have to change how we see things. Face to hurt. It sucked. And things in life sometimes are hard, but he also wasn't willing to let me stay there. You can't stay there because of the self-revolving cycle that you would stay in. And so as he lifted me out of there in that moment, it was in my pickup truck. Excuse me. I pulled out of there with hope. And then a couple of days later, I get a call from this gentleman that I had spoken to maybe a week or two earlier with Bob on the call. And he invited me to go to a training conference up in Canada. And he said, Bob would like you to be there, but we're going to charge you 15 grand to be there because you're not coming for free. Otherwise, you're not going to respect what could happen. He says, we may have something for you. And that was hard because a year earlier, I could have paid for 35 people or 40 people in the room to be there. I had the cash to do it. And in this moment, I didn't know how to do it, but we made a decision to go. Bob came back a couple of weeks prior to the event and says, you're not coming alone. I says, I'm not going to charge you. I want you to bring your wife and I want you to bring her up here because that's important. And we flew in there and we spent a week with him. And on day 6, Bob and this gentleman pulled me outside and just said, we'd like you to come work with us. We'd like you to come. The gentleman's name was Arash Vasugi, and he was just an incredible mentor of mine. And they just told me there's just no screwing around. This is going to change your life, but it's time for you to let that go. That is the old you. That has nothing to do with where you're going. Your desire to serve people is very evident. So again, I share that just to impress upon you and I and the audience is that we never know what door opens, but we just got to be willing to walk through a door, right? The price I paid to get there wasn't because they were greedy. They didn't need the money. They needed me to commit to something in my future. They needed me to decide that I was going to be willing to pivot and move. And so, fast forward a lot of years. I spent a lot of years with Bob. 2000, let's see, we're in 24. In February 22, when Bob passed away, obviously it left a great big hole. And at that point, I learned that maybe I didn't take advantage as much as I should have, and that maybe I took it for granted of having that proximity with Bob and that closeness. Now we were good and we were close, and I spent a lot of years. But in about August of that year, I made a decision that I felt the impression that Bob was saying, it's time for you to go do you. It's time for you to go explore. You can, in a way, I'm going to give you part of this mantle. You go. So we jumped out, went into the coaching industry. I had helped a young man earlier, about 7 or 8 years earlier, leave the corporate banking world and had brought them into the PGI world. We trained him to be a coach. He was having a successful business. And so we teamed up and did a joint venture called Elevated Alliance. And we started to work together and we started to build a coaching process around entrepreneurs. And then later, I took the CEO role of the mother company of his company, and we partnered there. And we're just expanding this coaching company. And it's just incredible because we both have different backgrounds. But what's most important to me is that we have impact, we have a lot of fun, and that we create financial prosperity, not just for ourselves and our families, but for other people around us, and that we can do more. Bob used to say all the time, you want to be, do more, have more, be more, do more, have more, and then give more. Be more, do more, have more, give more, and that has stuck with me as part of as my mission statement is to be more. More isn't better. Better is better, and that's what it used to mean. Is that we want to be better. We want to just be better all the time. And then as we gain the ability to expand our ability and become more valuable in the market, as we're blessed with prosperity, then we need to give back. We need to do better, and that's our mission at Elevated Worldwide and Elevated Alliance, is that we just have a desire to connect the human with who they are, because I think the largest problem in humanity today, if I could just say this, and then I'll let you move on to the next question, is that I don't want to say anything political, and I don't mean it this way, but the real pandemic isn't the disease. The real pandemic is mental wellness and emotional fitness. And it's not just in America, it's the whole world. And we live in a time where mental fitness is one of the biggest challenges, even for the corporate world. It's where most HR money is being spent. And I just feel like that there's so much need out there for people like yourself and myself, and people that can help re-identify themselves with who they are.
Awesome. Well, that itself could be another podcast, because I have thoughts on it, but I will leave it alone. Maybe we'll do another one.
Let's do it.
Yeah, another one there. But I wanted to go back to, 2 key points you made, and wanted to ask you, how do you use those points when you're coaching? One is, the first thing you mentioned about your wife is how she believed in you more than you believed in yourself. Same thing with Bob, right? So those things obviously seems to have had huge effect in where you are now.
Yeah.
So how do you use that in your coaching? Is that something
Yeah.
try to use
Yeah.
or see that in the coaching too? Yo,
I do. I mean, look, it just doesn't matter where you are in your life. You still have somebody on your team. You still have somebody in your life. It's just that what I used to do is go off on an island by myself.
mm-hmm,
And humans do that. We start to get distressed and frustrated and depressed and anxiety, all the things, and then we kind of tend to retreat, and we come back here and we hide. And one of the key components is always to have proximity around people that can help you.
mm-hmm,
And if it's not the closest ones to you, then you have a responsibility to find somebody that can. There's nobody that can create anything of consequence by themselves. Nobody. None of us can. I can't. You won't. None of Bob didn't do it.
mm-hmm,
Bob passed away with his mentors by his bedside.
mm-hmm,
That's how important it was to him to have Michael Beckwith and Mary Morrissey. And I could keep going down the list of people who passed that as he transitioned, they were sitting by his bed. Yes, his family was there and his beautiful wife and all those people, of course. But it was so important because we don't do anything alone. And that's because by nature, in essence, we're blind. And we ask people all the time, do you know your blind spots? Well, of course I do. No, you don't. That's why they're blind, right? And so proximity is key. And for me, I just had a spouse. I mean, she's my hero still today. That I still get the whole locker room swat on the rear end. Go get him, Tiger. You can do it. Have more faith. Yesterday I was frustrated with something. You're not. That's fear. That's not faith. And so I'm surrounded with that. And then I've been blessed to be around mentors. And I think that when I look at people, Raju, that seem to win, that seem to have a way of creating whatever we deem success is, they have mentors, they follow processes, and they always find themselves in the right environment. So no matter what's going on in your circumstances here, we still have the choice to find people. So every time we coach somebody, we teach proximity. In the time you have with us, you've got to be part of this environment because right now your thinking's here and we're thinking here. And the other thing I would say is that sometimes a relationship with somebody besides those that are the closest to us has an easier ability to be honest with us, right? Sometimes those closest to us, it's difficult for us to take advice from those that we love the most.
mm-hmm,
And I would dare say, if all of us looked at the drama and the capacity to have turmoil in our personal lives, most of it's from family.
mm-hmm.
Family, for some reason, does the most damage, and I don't know why. I have no theories on that. I don't even want to attempt to do that. But having somebody outside is key.
Yeah, that is very true. Yes, and that could be another podcast if we get well into why the psychology behind that, because I went into
Yeah.
it, myself. Well,
Yes.
the next question I have is, this is something we talked offline, right? One of the things you said key that you look at now when you are looking at a coaching client is not just try to, just find a client, but more you're looking at the fit and trying to make sure the person is actually going to benefit before you bring them aboard. So kind of
Yeah.
go through, I guess, you can't go through all the process, but a little bit of why you want to do that and what is the, I guess, the aim in doing that.
Well, first of all, the industry as a whole
Mm-hmm.
is pretty amazing, but there are things out there that tend to stamp the individuals with dollar signs on their forehead, meaning that it's about the money first. There has to be a transaction. I mean, that's life, right? We invest in our homes. We invest in people put hundreds of dollars a month into Starbucks coffee. I mean, we could go all the way down the list of where people spend their money. So you're not ever going to get free coaching and really ever have it be completely effective in your life. It's just not going to happen.
Right.
I mean, there might be a shot, but I think we seek people that are coachable in a sense that, yeah, they're willing to invest, but they're more willing to invest their time and their energy into what they want. Because you can invest 15 or 20 or 30,000, just like I did to run up to Toronto. But if I didn't go there with a specific outcome in mind, an ROI, what would I have gotten out of that weekend or that week? maybe nothing. And I probably wouldn't have expressed proper controlled desire where they would have recognized they were willing to work with me. I would have been chaotic and I would have been nervous and I would have been looking for the take. But I think as we look for people, success is not a secret, it's a system. A coaching client, though they want to give their coach credit, generally that shouldn't ever be the case. A good coach directs the person to do the things that they already know they should do. And through accountability and through proximity, gets them to live up to their potential, their own potential. And that's the real hero. The client is the real hero. And that's how we view it. When we hear our clients come back and give us raving reviews and say things, it's like, look, thank you. And I'll accept that. However, please look in the mirror and start being willing to take noticeable advantage of what you're doing because you did the work. You're in Texas, I'm in Idaho. If I was coaching you, I can't come there on a daily basis and make sure that you're doing the work. But if you're doing the work and you're focused on a reason why you're doing the work and you become that person who can achieve that, then all the glory should go to you. And so that's important to us, that we have a process. Most people get involved because of, in today's world, we have such short form thinking, right? I mean, we just live in a world where so much information. I mean, that's another podcast. There you go. Sounds like we have 3 more to do. but you got to follow a process that you can stay emotionally involved in. But if you're not emotionally involved in what you want, whatever that is, you're going to stay comfortable being uncomfortable. And for whatever reason, we can survive. You could earn $1 million a year and you could earn 30,000 a year, and somehow the human survives. Mm-hmm. And it's dangerous. It's a dangerous place. So I guess in a shorter form, we want to match. Does it mean that we're always perfect? No. But we want to give 100% of our effort to making sure that the student has the tools and enough accountability with honest, sincere, get off your rear end and let's go. You paid us to help you. We want you to win. People ask me all the time, why are you so fanatical about helping people? And I don't know. I mean, it's just in my psychic, it's just who I am. And it's a thrill ride. Some people get a thrill ride of going fast in cars. I get a thrill ride watching you win. Mm-hmm. And so either way, we both get the dopamine hit, right? So we look for that opportunity for people who are hungry. And, sometimes that comes from they're in a really bad spot. And sometimes it comes that they're really good spot in a lot of areas of life, but they got a lot of other things in other areas of their life. I was working with a gentleman once that was extremely wealthy. He was probably be listed in the top 100 wealthiest men in the world. And he came to Bob and wanted help, and I was assigned to help him. And he had nothing to do with money. He had houses all over the world, private airplanes, all that stuff. But he had no family life, no relationship life, no personal dignity when it came to him and his family. And he wanted that fixed. Well, if there are a set of rules to win, the same rules to become successful in finances, if you use them in your relationships, if they're correct, it's the same. And I think that's where a lot of people get really, really, really confused in coaching, is they think that there's magical tricks for every situation in our life, and there's not. There's one set of rules to win. And when you understand the laws and you develop a concise discipline about even in getting one law right, and then the next law, you can't help but step forward. And my favorite saying that Bob used to say is, the good you seek seeks you. The good you seek seeks you. You just got to get on that frequency. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, we'll get to our last 3 questions then, apart from maybe thinking about the other podcast episode we can do on the topics, which seems like we're discovering.
Absolutely.
What's the best book you read, or what's the best book you would recommend to people that you have read?
Well, I mean, the obvious answer would be Think and Grow Rich, but I'm not going to go down that road. I love Think and Grow Rich, but I'll tell you something that changed my life. The summer that I decided to go out to Toronto and make a decision if I was going to be in the coaching industry, I was asked to read this book called U Squared by Price Pritchett. Lives in Dallas. He's a Dallas author. Mm-hmm. And this is the very book. And as you can see, it's in lots of different pieces here. And I have probably 15 new ones, but this one means a lot to me because sitting out there at a construction facility in Ross, North Dakota, frustrated with my life. I pulled this book out after recommendation from Bob, and I started to read it. And the thing that I love the most about this book is first of all, it's little, right? Big, thick, or intimidating.
Right.
But the principles that Price Pritchard teaches. And so if anybody's out there wants to learn the strategy of multiplying your effectiveness and achieving quantum leaps, you have to study this. And you can't just read it. You've got to study it. I can tell you, I have used this in my career now for a decade and a half, this very book. And I've taught classes on this book, and I've seen people's lives change because of the simplicity of what Price does in here. Price Pritchett is a business coach, but he was a psychologist in the military. And so he comes from a science background and the illogical background of quantum leaping, which in most people in the world, they're either totally illogical or they're too scientific. But what Price does is he brings it into a very short form understanding. And so that's my favorite book of all time. I could go down a list of a lot of others, but yeah. Price, that book travels everywhere in the world I go. I never leave home without it.
Awesome. Well, I think, people might already know this answer, but I will ask anyway. What inspires you to get up and do what you do every day?
Well, you do, and people like you, and all kinds of people. I mean, it's being emotionally involved in people winning, and I love it. Yes, I like nice house. Yes, I like a car, and I love golf, and I love all those things, and that matters. But at the end of the day, Bob would say from stage, we're here to do God's work. That's what inspires me, is that I know that I have a gift, and I know that with humility, if I leverage that gift and honor that idea that I'm here to do that work, that I'll be fulfilled, and it's what fulfills me.
Awesome. Well, with that, the one tip you can share that has helped you, the latest one probably, I'm sure with your coaching career, you probably have a lot of tips, but latest one that helped you and can help others.
Yeah, thank you. I will use a couple words. Proximity is key. You want to have the right environment, and it doesn't cost a lot. In fact, it could cost almost nothing to find the right environment. It's expensive if you don't. Human capital, relationship capital gives us access to people that we would otherwise never get to connect. And you and I on this podcast are an exact example of that. We knew nothing of each other at all. And because of a connection on LinkedIn and because of a common friend that knew something about Bob Proctor, you and I are here, and we're developing a relationship. And that human capital, that relationship capital, is something that we should seek and honor and never take advantage of, because it gives us access and it opens doors for us.
That's a great tip, especially especially on social media, when people don't try to connect, just pitch or get something, which,
always about the take.
Always about the take instead of connecting, which is more, never know when that will result in something, but you just first connect it. Anyway, great tip, Bob. So I'm going to be posting all the information I have for, Bill, but, reach out to him. And we might have, like we talked about right now, I might have, might have multiple discussions. So we'll see what comes out of that. I'm hoping to have other possible scenarios where he and his partner might be on a call for somebody to, people to come in and take some coaching and give a preview of their coaching, perhaps. But that's in the future. We'll figure out when we'll do that. But anyway, reach out to him. I'll be posting all the social media with the clips or his website, contact info, whatever I have. So reach out to him if what he shared really touched you and you want to talk to him. Again,
thank you. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Hats off to you. You should have some credit here too, Raju. And it's I know what you do in your life, everyday life, but you're doing this on your time and outside. So hats off to you too. I think people should be recognizing you as well.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bill. All right.